All right, so today we're putting on our architect hats, but we're not working with brick and mortar, right? We're talking about data, systems, and policy. We're going to be drafting the master blueprint for a digital fortress. And trust me, without one, your security is basically built on sand. So let's get to it.
So just take a look at these two structures for a second. On one side, you've got this masterpiece of planning. It's strong, it's coherent, it's resilient. And on the other side, well, it's just chaos. And this is a perfect visual for what happens to security when there's no clear plan. It's just this reactive jumble of parts, always on the verge of collapsing. That master plan, our blueprint, that's what makes all the difference.
All right, so here's the plan for today's build. First, we'll cover why we even need a blueprint. Then, we'll dive into architecting the 4 critical layers. After that, we'll see how it all clicks together in the real world, learn how to keep our fortress standing strong, and finally, we'll talk about where you fit in as the architect.
Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1, the need for a blueprint. This is really all about making that shift, moving from that chaotic, firefighting state to one where we're in deliberate, structured control.
So, what does this blueprint actually do for us? Well, it really comes down to these 4 pillars. First, clarity. If people don't know what they're supposed to do, you just get confusion. Then, consistency. Without it, you get security gaps all over the place. Compliance. This one's huge. You've got to prove you're following the rules or you're facing big risks. And lastly, control. And honestly, this is the big one. It's about getting ahead of the game, managing risk before it becomes an incident.
All right, on to Section 2. This is where we get into the real nuts and bolts of it all. Architecting the 4 layers. We're going to deconstruct the key documents that take that big strategic vision and turn it into something people can actually do every single day.
In this image, it just lays it out so perfectly, doesn't it? You see how it's a pyramid? At the very top, the big idea is the policy. That supports the standards. Then you get the detailed floor plans, our procedures, and finally, the helpful tips, the guidelines. It all flows, top down, from vision to execution.
So, let's dig into that foundation, the security policy. Think of this as the 30,000-foot view. It's all about answering one big question: why? Why are we even doing this? It's super broad, it applies to everybody, and it's non-negotiable. It's mandatory. It's basically senior management putting a stake in the ground and saying, we will protect our information. That's the why behind everything else.
Okay, so what holds that policy up? The pillars, security standards. So if the policy was the why, the standard is the what. It answers the question, what do we have to use to actually follow the policy? Now we're getting more specific, right? We're talking about specific technologies, specific systems, and notice this is still mandatory. It's not enough to just say, hey, encrypt your laptops. The standard says you will use AS256-bit encryption. That's what gives you consistency.
All right, next layer down, the floor plans, or our security procedures. This is the how. How do I actually do it? These are your super detailed step-by-step instructions, like a recipe for a single task. Yeah, the scope is super narrow, but make no mistake. Just like policies and standards, these are mandatory. You have to follow these exact steps to get your laptop encrypted. No winging it.
And that brings us to the last layer, the design notes, or security guidelines. This is where we answer, what's the smart way to do things? Now here's the key difference. Unlike the other 3, guidelines are not mandatory. They're advisory. Think of them as recommended best practices. Helpful advice. Like the example here, securing your home Wi-Fi. It's a really good idea, for sure, but you're not going to get in trouble if you don't.
Okay, so we've talked about the 4 layers in theory. Now, let's get to Section 3 and see how this blueprint actually works in the real world. This is where it all comes together.
Okay, this slide is fantastic because it really shows you that top-to-bottom flow. Let's walk through this secure remote access example. The policy starts high level. All remote connections must be secure. Then the standard gets specific. You must use the corporate VPN with multi-factor authentication. The procedure? That's your step-by-step guide to installing the VPN client. And you can see how it flows all the way down to a simple guideline, a helpful tip about using a wired connection. It's a perfect straight line from vision to action. And this table here? This is your ultimate cheat sheet. Seriously, it puts everything we've talked about side by side so you can see it all at once. You've got the purpose, the why, the what, the how, and the smart way. You can see the scope getting narrower and narrower, from company-wide down to a single task. And that crucial difference in mandate. The first 3 are mandatory, but the guideline is just advice.
It's a great reference to have.
Okay, so we've designed and built our fortress. But guess what? The job is never really done. Which brings us to Section 4, maintaining the fortress. Because a blueprint isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. It's a living document. Threats change, the business changes, our fortress has to be able to adapt.
And that adaptation, it follows a very specific life cycle. You create it and get it approved. Then you got to publish it and make sure everyone knows about it. Then comes the hard part, implementation and enforcement. And here's the key. You have to review and update it regularly. And eventually, when it's outdated, you have to formally retire it. This whole cycle is what keeps your blueprint relevant and effective.
So to guide that whole life cycle, we need to stick to a few key principles. And the first one is maybe the most important. Clarity is your strongest control. Think about it. When rules are fuzzy, it doesn't create flexibility. It just creates loopholes and vulnerabilities. Okay, principle number 2. This one keeps us honest. Trace everything back to the why. If you have a rule or a procedure that doesn't clearly connect back to a core policy, that why we talked about, then it's probably not security. It's just bureaucracy. And nobody wants that.
And the third principle really gets to the heart of it, the human side. Governance builds culture. See, these documents, they aren't just a list of rules to follow. They're teaching tools. When you do this right, over time, you transform security from a checklist into a shared belief system. You get to a point where everyone feels a sense of ownership, like they're a defender of the fortress.
And that's a perfect lead-in to our final section, your role as the architect. Because look, this isn't just theory. This is a practical framework, a set of tools that you can actually use.
That's right. You are the architect. Real, lasting security strength, it doesn't come from buying the latest, fanciest tool. It's built, carefully, layer by layer, on the foundation of a solid governance framework. One that's well-designed, easy to understand, and kept up to date. And now, you've got the blueprint to do exactly that.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this simple phrase: build with purpose.
And so, we'll leave you with this question. You have the blueprint now. You get the principles. You know how to build with purpose. So the only question left is, what will you build?